Thank you very much, Dr. Avilés. So that was biology, definitely. That was definitely a crash course. I hope everyone took notes. So as last time, we'll open the floor to questions. Now, as you may remember from last time, this is being recorded for posterity. So we should say hello to everybody out there on the web. And they can't hear your question. So if you can keep your question very short, then I will try to paraphrase it so that it mics into the electronics. And then Dr. Avilés can answer it. So are there any questions that you have? Yes, here in the front.
You pointed out how antibiotic resistance is spread by the misuse of antibiotics by human beings. Would you care to comment on the fact that it seems to me that large feedlot operators know nothing about Darwinian evolution in bacteria?
So the question is, there was an argument made for how antibiotic resistance evolves with inopportune use of antibiotics in humans, but why isn't that information being used in agriculture, particularly for animals?
So should I just okay. Yeah, so yeah, that's right. So I only mentioned the situation when humans are taking antibiotics themselves, but there is a number of circumstances in which we're just overusing antibiotics. There are all these soaps that have antibacterial agents that we don't really need to use. And of course, the use of antibiotics in cattle and other farm animals is probably not a good idea. Yeah, because that is going to spread antibiotic resistance across the board.
So the kind of issue is, so maybe you could follow that up. How well received is evolutionary medicine in the medical profession? You said it's not in the medical schools yet, but is it going to be? And if so, is it just that the humans are ahead of the departments of agriculture?
Yeah, so it is going to be a long process to get the medical schools to change the curricula. I think that there is a bit of a campaign, like various people, like Randy Nessig, the author of the book, he has been talking to medical schools in various places to try to get them to incorporate some courses on evolution and medicine. I think that they are definitely receptive, but there is a lot of inertia in terms of changing the curricula. And I think it is not necessarily a lack of interest, but just a lot of inertia. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There is here. Yes, madam?
Thank you very much. Now I know why when I lived in West Africa, nobody knew, there was no translation for the word allergy where I lived in rural West Africa. My question is, for me, what the example I always heard about an adaptive response was sickle cell anemia in Black African Americans, and how that was believed to be an adaptation for malaria resistance. Is the way that works actually then through that iron withholding, which I'd never heard before?
So the question is, how does the sickle cell anemia story work out in terms of evolution, right? Is that
and okay. Iron withholding
right, and is it particularly iron withholding? Yeah.
It is actually different. So with sickle cell anemia, there are 3 possible genotypes, individuals who don't have the gene for the sickle cell disease, and then individuals who have 2 copies of the gene that causes the sickling. And the individuals that have the 2 copies of the gene, they suffer for anemia, and it is a big problem for them. But individuals that carry only 1 copy of the gene, they are protected from malaria because their red blood cells sickle. So the pathogens, the parasite is a protozoan that causes malaria, cannot enter the red blood cells when they sickle. So that protects them from malaria.
So it's the misshapen.
Yeah, it's the misshape of the red blood cell that is responsible for that. Mm-hmm.
So the idea is you should get 1 good copy from your mom and 1 sickle cell copy from your dad, and then you're okay, but don't get both. Okay, so after up here with and then down here.
Yeah, coming back to the birth canal problem with 2 large heads, you would think that we would have evolved with pointier stovepipe heads. Why haven't we?
So the question is, why don't we have pointier heads so we can have the same amount of brain but just have it going up instead of out, right? Is that the question? So that's a very serious question. So why don't we have why are our heads shaped the way they are, given that it's such a big deal?
Yeah. So I do have to clarify that I am an evolutionary biologist and not a medical doctor. So some things I'm not going to be able to answer very well. But having had 2 children myself, They do have a soft spot in the head, so that when they are born, that allows the head to be squeezed, so that when they are being born, that helps with it. But the other way that humans have solved the problem of large brains and a small pelvic opening is by having the babies born at a younger developmental stage that they might have. And that's why they require a long period of development, because they are born at a younger chronological age than in other mammals, relative to their general development.
So, yes, down here in the front.
Yeah, now, I don't think you suggested an intro into this question, but let me ask it. I'm thinking about stem cell engineering, and I'm wondering whether or not, strict Darwinian evolution plays a role there, or these researchers simply tweak Darwinian evolution.
Okay, so the question is, the stem cell research, and just to clarify, I think the idea there is that will be able to go in and change the genetic material ourselves, like engineer the baby sort of so that we change its genes. That's what you're saying, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also that what we hear about all the time, that indeed you can actually produce certain parts of the body in the lab.
Oh, okay.
That's stem cell engineering is what we're thinking.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, those are two different. Okay, those are quite different things. So you can comment on both of them, I guess.
So, well, definitely, I think that evolutionary thinking is also relevant for that question, because the stem cells are cells that have maintained the ability to differentiate, while most of our cells in our body have already differentiated and they cannot go back and turn into something else. So just knowing the existence of the stem cells and where they are is something that evolutionary biology might have predicted. And actually the idea is that that is a mechanism to prevent cancer, because the stem cells retain the ability to reproduce themselves, and they are restricted to some specific tissues, because those are the ones that suffer the greatest danger of turning into cancer. And the already differentiated cells have sort of lost that ability to continue to reproduce to some extent. So in that sense, I guess, knowing where the stem cells are and what their functions are is something that evolutionary biology might have predicted or can be explained by evolutionary biology. But in terms of the use themselves of the stem cells, then I would have to think a little bit about that. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Right up here at the back. Yep.
My question about HIV virus particularly, and what evolutionary thinking, how it would develop with
How it would be what?
in the research to find a vaccine for HIV virus. I know it's highly mutant, the virus itself, but the fact that attacks our immune system in some negative way, and how it's
Okay, so the question was about the HIV virus and just a little bit about the story and why there isn't a vaccine and what we can do. So the background there is that the HIV virus actually attacks the immune system. So it has a sort of a double problem. Do you want to comment?
So the problem with developing a vaccine for the HIV virus comes because it's a virus that evolves really fast. It mutates really fast. So any vaccine that we developed is going to not be useful in just a few generations of the virus. Is going to change to something else. So that is the problem why it is so difficult to come up with a vaccine for the HIV virus. That is not the case for other types of viruses that don't seem to be evolving that fast. So for instance, the flu virus, it evolves and it changes from season to season, but within a season it tends to be fairly consistent. So we can actually use some methods of evolutionary biology to look at the current strains of the flu virus and decide which one is the likely one to be the most common one in the next generation and develop a vaccine for that. But the HIV virus is just changing really fast. So that's why we cannot come up with a vaccine for it.